Tim, Latinoamérica es una región del mundo urbana y la mayoría de los países en Latinoamérica, el 80% de la población es urbana. Aparte de la población, ¿por qué crees que es importante que vayamos a plantar iglesias en las ciudades?
Yes, and I actually looked up I did some research and found that from 2015 to 2025, another perhaps 45 to 50 million people will move into cities in Latin America. Another 45 to 50 million people who were not city dwellers will move into Latin American cities in the next 10 years. I will say later in this conference, I will say this, Jesus Christ tells us we must go to all the nations to make disciples, which means we have to go where the nations are. There's no reason to do missions in the middle of the Sahara Desert because there's nobody there. If the nations are going somewhere, and if we don't go there, we're disobeying the Great Commission. We're disobeying what Jesus said. And so I can put it like this. We need churches everywhere there are people. But the people of the world are moving into cities faster than the church is going. And that's disobedient. In other words, if the people of the world are moving faster than the church, maybe because the church doesn't like how expensive it is, or how difficult it is, or how so many of the people are different than us, that's disobeying what Jesus said, which is go to the nations. And so we ought to go into the cities because the nations are going to the cities and we need to obey Jesus.
Yeah. Y en algunas veces somos como Jonás, no queremos ir a la ciudad.
That's right, and there are reasons why Jonah didn't want to go there. We guess part of it was that the people were different. That was an Assyrian city. He was an Israelite, and it's rather natural to like being around people who are just like you. And any city you go to, there'll be some people like you, but a lot of people who are not. So it's not a comfortable place. And Jonah, God of course rebukes Jonah for putting his own comfort and his own national, his own support of his own race over the good of the people of Nineveh. And so we don't want to be guilty like Jonah.
Yeah. En otro lado, las ciudades en Latinoamérica han estado siendo golpeadas por el crimen, por drogas, por mala política, y la gente quiere correr de las ciudades. ¿Por qué tú dices en tus libros que la gente cristiana debería de quedarse en las ciudades si todo esto está sucediendo?
Well, every Christian every real Christian believes the gospel. Jesus, Paul says the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. It's in Romans 1. He doesn't say the gospel has power or it leads to power. It's the power of God. Mm-hmm. It changes lives. So you could think of it as a treasure. It is. Christians should not take that treasure to safe places where people are like them and where they're simply more comfortable. It's actually just completely unselfish. It's almost like when you become a Christian, God gives you something the world needs, and then you really don't belong to yourself anymore. I mean, all the places where Jesus says you lose your life to find your life, what he really means is you don't belong to yourself anymore. 1 Corinthians 6, he says, you're not your own, you're bought with a price. So if I have something that's valuable for the world, I remember as a new Christian, I realized that early on, and I realized, wow, this is great to be a Christian, and I'm saved, and I have God in my life, but now I can't just go anywhere I want. It's selfish. And I'm not my own, I'm bought with a price. And Jesus Christ actually became very unsafe by coming to the earth. He moved into a neighborhood that was not only risky, but he knew it would kill him. And so when we move into neighborhoods, we probably won't die, but we actually might get our purse stolen. So if Jesus, in order to save us, was willing to actually die, it seems to us that for us to go to places where we can do good, and it's risky, it's not much compared to what Jesus did for us. So for all these reasons, Christians should not think of their own safety first.
Amén. Amén.
Tim, nos damos cuenta que todos los materiales que tú has desarrollado tienen que ver mucho con la ciudad de Nueva York y lo que ustedes están haciendo ya en Estados Unidos, específicamente en Manhattan. ¿Cuál crees tú es un paralelo que podemos hacer entre una ciudad como Manhattan y las ciudades de América Latina? ¿Crees que hay algún vínculo?
If you go to the middle of New York City, if you go to the middle of Mexico City, if you go to the middle of Hong Kong, you will find there's many, many similarities. But if you go to, let's go 100 miles outside of New York to New Jersey, 100 miles outside of Hong Kong to southern China, 100 miles outside of Mexico City, somewhere, you'll see the people in those places are extremely different. So the people out in the countryside here are radically different than the people in South China, radically different than New Jersey. But the people in the center are actually not greatly different. Many of them work for the same companies. Many of them have gone to similar schools. Many drink the same drinks. And so here's the point. The point is that the big cities of the world are more like each other than their own nations. So they're actually, New York is actually more like Mexico City than it is like the middle of Pennsylvania where I'm from. And when I look around here, I say, well, honestly, this is much more like New York City than Pennsylvania where I'm from. So in that means that there will be things that in every big city, I can learn something from ministry here, but not everything. There'll be differences and similarities. So it's the job of the minister, of a student of ministry, to go to the other big cities. If you're trying to reach Taipei, then you want to look at Berlin, and you want to look at Nairobi, and you want to look at London, and you want to look at New York. You want to look everywhere and say what seems to happen every place. Then I need to do that.
Yeah.
And where are the differences? So if you just pick it up and try to put it down, that won't work. But honestly, in the early days of Redeemer's ministry, people came from the Netherlands and from China. And they said, we're trying to reach Beijing, Amsterdam, and Beijing and Amsterdam is more like New York City than the rest of our countries. So that means that the people who have ministered out in the countryside can't reach the cities. And we'd rather learn from you than from our own people about reaching. So the cities are more like each other, and you just have to learn from them.
Tim, acabas de mencionar que la persona que está tratando de discernir una ciudad como un plantador necesita ciertas habilidades. ¿Podrías mencionarnos cuáles son esas habilidades que un plantador de iglesia necesita para una ciudad?
You need all the normal skills of a pastor. You need to know how to preach, and you know how to pastor people. You know how to lead. So all the skills you would learn for just being any pastor, you need to have that. So it's a minimum. To be a church planter, you have to get up to the minimum of being a good pastor. Then you have to have something else. And I think there's two things. One is you have to have 1 foot outside of your home culture, but 1 foot in. You're not. You mustn't be a foreigner. You are still from here. You're still a Latino. You know, I'm still American. You have 1 foot in your culture, but you have 1 foot outside. And that's why you do want to learn from the other cities of the world. That's why you do want to learn from Asian cities and African cities and European cities, because it helps you see your own culture. It's difficult to see your own culture from the inside. You have to get out. And so you get out of your culture, and you have to learn from other cultures to even see your own culture. So you have to have 1 foot out, and then you need to be what give me your Espanol, an entrepreneur. Would you use the same word?
Emprendedor.
Yeah, same word basically. It means a willingness to innovate, a willingness to, an ability to work hard without somebody standing right over you with telling you. So you need to be an entrepreneur, you need to have 1 foot outside of your culture, and then you need to be able to do all the things that the other ministers of your nation can do.
Hablando acerca de cultura y la cultura en la ciudad, ¿cuál ¿Tú crees que sea la forma más efectiva de llegar a una ciudad, de transformar una ciudad? Hablas en tus libros acerca de lo que llamamos ecosistema.
Well, first of all, and this is, for example, I'm a Presbyterian, and I'm glad to be a Presbyterian. I also know that yes. But I also know that Presbyterians in every culture tend to reach a certain kind of person. By God's providence in Britain, in England, you couldn't go to the best, you couldn't go to Oxford or Cambridge, you couldn't go to a good university until the 1860s unless you were an Anglican. So what happened was the Baptists and Presbyterians ended up being pushed out into the lower classes. And so the Presbyterians, if you go to Scotland, they tend to be the simple people. There's other countries where the Presbyterians tend to be the educated. So here's a denomination, it's got a tradition, I love its tradition, but I also realize it can never reach the whole city. There's no one denomination that can. You may know that I often will get in trouble with my other Presbyterian colleagues because they'll say, you shouldn't be working with other denominations so closely if you really believed that Presbyterianism was good. And I say, I do really believe it's good, but I also know that in His providence, God uses different denominations, they all believe the gospel, to reach a whole city. So that's one part of the ecosystem, is that you must collaborate with other networks of churches and not try to only think that your people can win the whole city. The second part, though, is the ecosystem believes that cities are filled with institutions. An institution is many, many kinds of organizations. That's what really makes a city a city. And there are many Christian organizations that are not churches that can often specialize. In some cases, for example, theological training is a specialty. An organization, institution might be a seminary. And you need to find the ones that are good and work with them and maybe even make them better. And in an ecosystem, the different parts are brought together humbly, people trying to learn from each other, but also trying to better each other, assuming that each of us only sees part of the picture. I know that this is new in many, many cities. In many cities, we have our tribe. Yeah. And we just work in our tribe, and we try to make our tribe bigger. That doesn't help the whole city. And therefore, that's why the ecosystem is to think holistically about a whole city. And I know it's a new idea, but honestly, the cities where I've seen the gospel have big impact, that people have this understanding.
Y en esta conferencia vamos a hablar sobre el ecosistema, pero también vamos a hablar sobre qué clase de iglesia necesita ese ecosistema. ¿Puedes describir qué clase de iglesia necesita una ciudad?
A good church planter has one foot outside of his own culture. That is, he can learn from other cultures, and that makes him better where he is. You go to Germany and you say, they do that better than we do, and I need to learn from that. So you have to learn. I would say the kind of church that fits in an ecosystem has that. It's like a community humility, sort of like we would say there's a triumphalistic attitude where there's an old English proverb called "Wisdom perishes with us," meaning when I die, all the wisdom will go out of the world. It's a sense that we have the wisdom and nobody else does. A whole church can have that attitude. So there needs to be a humility saying we have something to contribute, but we need to depend on other people. We can't do it all. We need to learn from other people. That's actually difficult. I believe the gospel that I'm saved by grace, not by my good works. If it really works itself through my heart and my mind and through my entire congregation, it will have that kind of humility that will enable it to fit into an ecosystem.
Sabemos que ustedes comenzaron una red en Nueva York y en diferentes ciudades del mundo. ¿Podrías comentarnos acerca de cuáles fueron los mayores obstáculos que tuvieron comenzando estas redes en las principales ciudades del mundo? ¿Y que nos puedas dar algún consejo para nosotros?
Well, that's a great question. I think one of the reasons why City to City, which starts as an American organization. City to City, I am honored that so many people from other parts of the world have been willing to learn from and connect to City to City because it's an American organization. Americans are very well known for being smug, for believing wisdom perishes with them, and having a very imperialistic attitude toward everyone else. We know what to do. And in the church, I do know that the churches of the world very often do not want to learn from American churches because of that attitude. Now, over the years, I've been honored and surprised at how often people have come from around the world to say, we do want to learn from you. I actually think part of what helps there is two things. One is it's New York, it's not America. In other words, our ministry started in New York. And so a lot of people who would certainly not want to learn from other parts of America would say, well, the things you're doing in New York will transfer. I would hope part of it was the gospel has affected us and made us a little less arrogant. Americans tend to be arrogant. Now, when you set up a network, the real question is how closely tied. What do you ask us to do, and what should you not ask us to do? You don't want to be over-dependent or under-connected. Now, this is not a new issue. This is, all institutions around the world that are global have the same problem. In fact, we recently hired a new president, Steve Shackelford. He's the new president of City to City. And he's not from the missionary world, he's from the business world, where he has created these partnerships around the world. When you have people, both American and someone from another nationality, putting together joint ventures where neither side actually owns the other. In a joint venture, you're not reporting to us. We don't control you. At the same time, we come into an agreement. We say we're going to work together, and it's usually the bonds of friendship and trust that enable us to work together. So that's never easy. There's no one person who owns it. It's always easier if one person is in charge. But when two people who both have power get together and honor each other's power, that takes some time. Also, every part of the world for us is a little different. So we have found that some parts of the world, lay people are more the leaders in the network, and other parts of the world, pastors are more the leaders. And we want to honor the different things that God's doing in those nations. They're not all the same. So our relationship with you cannot be the same as a relationship to Australia or to Europe or to Asia Pacific. So I think most of it is you need to constantly let us know what you need, and you also need to constantly let us know where you feel like we've overstepped, or whether we've actually pulled back too far. And we've sometimes with an over fear of controlling you might say we feel like orphans, and we feel like mom and dad are not spending enough time with us. So I actually think we have a ways to go. This is a new area for us, but from the beginning it's always been we want national leaders. We don't send Americans to do ministry in the cities. We want national leaders. We want to partner. We want to serve. We want to give you expertise but not control you. We've always been like that, but now it's, when you have organizations, we still have a lot to learn. So you have to be willing, trust us that we actually will listen to your criticism. Whereas I do know a lot of American organizations, I filter it out. We'll try to be better.
Y ya para finalizar, esto es una de las cosas que más apreciamos de tu ministerio, de nuestro ministerio en City to City. This is one of the things that we appreciate the most about your ministry and our ministry in City to City. That que tú no estás, siempre has dicho que no copiemos Redeemer. You always have said, do not copy Redeemer. Get the principles and take the gospel to your own city. Y traer el Evangelio a tu propia ciudad. Y es por eso que apreciamos este ministerio, creemos en este ministerio, y por eso estamos desarrollando City to City Latinoamérica, algo que necesitábamos desde hace mucho tiempo. That is why we are bringing City to City Latin America, because this is what we really need in Latin America. Thank you for being with
Oh,
us.
thank you for all you're doing.
God bless you.